I wanted to share a little bit more about editing. As I mentioned before, the editing software is beyond the scope of this course, but I remember how I learned, and it was basically sitting beside an editor who was working on one of our films. To me, that was the best experience because I had read stuff about film editing. I had heard from people, it's pretty straightforward. You just gotta blah 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 and blah blah blah. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I would watch YouTubes and I sort of got the idea, but it wasn't until I actually sat down with somebody and watched it in action. Because editing software is not exactly, I would say, intuitive. And I'll try to show you a couple of screenshots and stuff to give you the idea. I use a product called Power Director. I don't get perks for saying that or anything. It's just one that I happened on. My friends use other ones. They use things like Premiere. They use Final Cut. Some folks use DaVinci. There's all kinds of packages out there. So many folks I know use iMovie, Windows Movie Maker. Whatever has come with your gadgetry, your computer, your phone, is definitely fine to get started. But what you're going to see is most editors are going to open up with a very unfriendly, complicated looking, and yet amazingly blank screen. And I always like to think of it, now that I've worked with editors for quite a bit of time now, that there's this great box up top, and that's what I like to call the playpen or the sandbox. And that's where I go and get all the little files that go into my film. So, in other words, I typically will have imagery, as we mentioned before, and sound. So, I have dialogue or narrative tracks that are individual files on my computer. I have video files that are the imagery. They may have some ambient sound that was recorded if I use my smartphone to film something. And I may have music or other sound effects, but all of those are individual files, and I normally organize those into folders so I can go into one place and grab everything that I need. After that, I pull that into that sandbox or playpen area. And then there's another part of most editors, it's called the timeline. All right, and that's usually below or nearby to this sandbox playpen area. You pull the individual pieces that you want in your film into that timeline, organized basically from beginning through to the end. And it's like hanging clothes on a clothesline, I always like to think. You're putting the individual pieces, you're trimming things, you're moving things together. You're making it flow in the way that's going to be good for your film. The other part is, of course, there's usually beginning titles and ending titles, and those are like the bread that goes around the sandwich. At some point, when you're satisfied with how things look, you've pulled everything into the playpen, then you've pulled the individual pieces and spread them out on your timeline. You're going to want to do what's called producing the film or rendering it. It'll be called different things, but essentially you want to hit a button that says, make this. And it will go away. It will take all the pieces that you've laid out and it will turn them into a movie file. And that's what you'll get at the end of that process. So an editor eats individual pieces that go into a film and it spits out a film. The best way to learn editing tools is to find one you can work with, the most basic one you can get your hands on, and play with it. It's the very, very best way, unless you can also sit beside someone who will say, here's how it works. That's the very best thing. So trying to approximate it here with a bit of description, but again, see what's on your phone, ask around, see what's on your home computer. It may be a piece of software that you really were barely aware was there. It's probably there, and it's worth playing with, because if you can get good at doing your own edits, you can make films really fast, and you can make them with your own skills, and you don't need to rely on somebody. You don't need to wait for it to be finished. If you can do everything yourself to make your micro short films, you'll be very self-reliant. So do learn editing. Watch YouTubes, pick up some kind of editor and try it out, and you'll learn. Practice is the very, very best way. Okay, good luck. Enjoy editing.